I'm delighted to say that I'm now joined by the Labour Party Chair, Anneliese Dodds, to respond to all of the day's news from the Labour side of the bargain. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
First, I just wanted to touch on a different foreign issue, and that's the situation in the Middle East. We heard from President Biden overnight a very clear warning to Israel that he wouldn't continue supplying weapons to Israel if there was a ground invasion to a population centre and specifically to Rafah. Is that the right line to be taking?
Well, Labour's been really clear there must not be an offensive on Rafah. There are a huge number of people, obviously, there, displaced people. Labour's been absolutely clear any such offensive must be stopped. We've said that repeatedly because of the appalling impact that would have on that enormous number of displaced people. We believe there must be an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We've called on the UK government to use every ounce of diplomatic muscle that it has to be working with other nations now, both to prevent that offensive, which would be so damaging, but above all to secure that immediate humanitarian ceasefire that's so desperately needed.
Closer to home, the Education Secretary was on with us last hour and saying that part of the reason the Prime Minister's called Vice-Chancellors to number 10 for a meeting is to try and get ahead of college campus protests getting out of hand, similar to what we've seen in the US. Is that a sensible ploy?
Well, of course, freedom to protest is not the same thing as freedom to abuse, and it's really important whenever there's any form of abuse, if that's anti-Semitism or any other form of prejudice, that it is dealt with. So it is important, of course, that universities ensure that campuses are safe places to learn. I know that many of them have been seeking to do that. We are, however, concerned that the government's Free Speech Act could actually make this more difficult, could prevent universities from, for example, if they've got concerns about a speaker, ensuring that they're not able to speak on campus if they would be stirring up prejudice. That was the wrong decision for government to have taken to reduce universities' ability to deal with those kinds of issues.
I wanted to touch on the defection of Natalie Elphicke to Labour from Conservatives. As chair of the Labour Party, were you part of the discussions to see that defection take place?
So those issues are normally dealt with by a very small number of people, so I wasn't part of that decision. I heard about it probably at a similar time to many other people. And
Same level of shock on your face as Sam Coates's when the news crossed?
Well, I have to say, actually, that, of course, Natalie Elphicke is the third Conservative MP now to have taken that decision, to have been clear that the Conservative Party can't deliver the change that our country needs, that it's only Labour that's got a plan to turn our country around, give Britain its future back. And so, very obviously, she did make that decision in dramatic fashion yesterday, but following after two other Conservative MPs who've done the same.
So clearly there's been, as not quite 24 hours, but almost a day has passed, there's been more reporting of how it's gone down within the Labour Party. She's from the right, she's from the Conservatives. Does it suggest that your party is lacking a spine, lacking principle in any way?
Well, I don't think anyone who reads Natalie Elphicke's statement could come to that conclusion. She's very clear in that statement that she believes it's only Labour that can deliver the hope and optimism that our country needs. It's only Labour that can deliver on issues that matter to her constituents. And she specifies the Conservative failures on migration, the fact only Labour has a plan to deliver on migration, the kind of security that we need in the future, but also that it's only Labour that has a plan to deliver the homes that are desperately needed. And in her statement, she sets out the impact of those failures on housing from the Conservatives, particularly for children in temporary accommodation. And in doing so, I think she's articulating what many people, not just Labour MPs, but actually what many people up and down the country are seeing in their own lives.
I mean, I agree. If you read solely her statement yesterday, you probably conclude that she has similar views to most members of your parties. But of course, if you read more broadly and some of her past statements, not even statements from that long ago, that there's many that directly conflict with that, whether she's saying don't trust Labour on immigration, whether she's saying that Labour wants open borders. She called Keir Starmer a softie. I guess, again, I just come back to the point, a full switch from someone from Labour to the Conservatives. Is there a limit to how many people you could take like that without it looking like you're pursuing headlines rather than principles?
Well, of course, it has to be clear that people share the Labour Party's approach, that they're committed to changing our country for the better in the same way that the Labour Party under Keir Starmer's leadership is. But, obviously, Natalie Elphicke was previously a Conservative MP. So indeed was Dan Poulter. So indeed was Christian Wakeford. All three of them have taken that decision to ultimately switch to a party that has got a plan, a plan to deliver that housing that's needed, a serious plan on migration, a serious plan for our economy as well. And ultimately, in doing this, she has put her constituents in Dover first and indeed the national interest first.
And can you rule out a peerage won't be offered to her?
Well, absolutely. That would clearly be totally inappropriate if there was any kind of a transaction here. I think it's clear that what Natalie Elphicke has done is put her constituents and their concerns first, and indeed the national interest.
Just want to get your take as well on the economy. A Bank of England decision today. Would Labour welcome an interest rate cut if it came about?
Well, of course, the Bank of England is independent and its decision-making needs to be as well. That was one of the fundamental changes that previous Labour governments made to the economy, making the Bank of England independent. We wouldn't seek to be influencing their decision at all. But what we would be doing is actually using the mechanism that government has got available to it to get our economy growing again. The Conservatives have not been using those mechanisms. We don't have an industrial strategy as a country. We don't have the kinds of policies on skills that Labour has set out, or indeed the Sovereign Wealth Fund that Labour would put in place so that we're catalysing that investment in the jobs of the future that are so desperately needed.
Anneliese Dodds, thanks so much for joining us today. Very much appreciated. Anneliese Dodds, the chair of the Labour Party.